Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Danielle LoDuca. Welcome to the Thriving Muslim Woman. I am so pleased to be here with you as always. And today, inshallah, we are going to be talking about a wall of silence or a silent wall, whichever way you want to put it. There is this specific kind of silence that is louder than any argument. It's the silence that sits between two people on a couch, two people who love each other but have forgotten how to reach each other. It's the wall built of everything you're not saying. And today, inshallah, I'm going to show you why that silence is not peace. Instead, it's a slow motion collapse of your inner architecture and of what could be a thriving relationship. This last year, I had to look at my husband and I had to talk about a future that included my cancer results. We had to talk about our children's future in a way no parent ever wants to. And in those moments, the temptation to stay silent, to protect him by not speaking the truth, was overwhelming. But what I've realized throughout this experience is that silence is not protection. Silence is like a prison. And today, we're going to break out, inshallah. So I want you to be brave. If you're listening to this video, I would like you to be brave for a second and just type silent in the comments if there's a conversation that you've been avoiding for more than a month. You don't have to say what it is. Just acknowledge that that silence exists. So in every relationship, right, a relationship is between two people, but there's a third entity, and that third entity is the unspoken. So every time that you swallow a truth to avoid a conflict, or for whatever reason, right, there's so many excuses that we can make for this, you're actually feeding that unspoken entity. And eventually, that unspoken becomes so big that there's no more room left for you. So you're crowding yourself out by holding things in. But why do we do it? Why, if you take a moment right now, think about it, right? Think about a person that you're in a relationship with. It could be a spouse, a parent, it could be a friend, a sibling, it could be your child. And think about something that you are not saying. You're not having a conversation about it. So I can give you a really great way to do this. So if you have a journal, if you want to write this down and you want to journal about this, this can be really powerful. And this whole episode is going to be really about creating and cultivating awareness about this. So we're not necessarily going to solve this problem today, although I want to welcome your questions. So if you have questions about how to do this, or what about in this situation or that scenario, feel free to comment on this video and ask your questions. But we really want to focus first on cultivating that awareness, because oftentimes we're not even aware of the things we're not saying. We think that, something happens, we may have thoughts about it, like someone may say something or do something, or, we feel something, or we need something, we want something, and we hold it in. And then time goes by. And we feel like that opportunity has passed or the situation's gone. We don't realize how we're actually holding on to that unspoken conversation. But why? Why do we do this? Right? So think about it. Oh, I didn't even give you the sentence. So the way to cultivate this awareness is you can ask yourself, you can actually just say, I am not having a conversation about blank with blank. So I'm not having a conversation about, and in the blank goes, what are you not having a conversation about? And with blank is, who are you not having a conversation with? Because this is going to be different in every different scenario. What are you not having a conversation about with your mother? What are you not having a conversation about with your husband? What are you not having a conversation about with your siblings, with your child? Okay, and if you can repeat this exercise over and over and over again. And it's going to unearth so many things that you are holding on to. And those things are just sitting inside your mind. Sometimes they're going around in loops, and these things might be coming up for you again and again and again. And you're thinking about them, right? Because they're unreleased. They're just sitting inside your mind. And by doing this exercise and unearthing those conversations that you're not having, you can actually start to look at those situations, look at those topics, and understand which one of those things are actually impacting your communication, your connection, your vitality. And so why we do this, it's because our brains are wired for safe over true. So we're constantly trying to seek safety. That's the job, one of the jobs of our brains, right? So even if something is not true, or not if something's not true, but even if there's a really important truth, right? And you feel that urge and you feel that need to speak that truth, you may not do so because you prefer safety. And it may feel unsafe to be open. It may feel unsafe to be vulnerable. It may feel unsafe to speak the truth, right? And so you keep it inside. Maybe you feel like you don't have the tools, you don't know how to communicate this topic to the person, right? And sometimes we think, well, if I say this, the other person is going to get angry, or they're going to be sad, or they're going to be hurt, or they're going to react in this way or that way. And so we keep it inside because we're seeking safety instead. We fear that if we speak, this relationship will break. But the truth is, a relationship in these circumstances is already breaking under the weight of the secrets. And we tend to know this. If you ever watch TV, there are, shows how do they create so much drama? It's just one person has to hold a secret, and then it creates a whole slew of enough drama to create a whole episode or a whole series out of it, right? And I see this with teams as well in organizations. When you have a team and they're all working for the same mission, right? It just takes one time someone decides not to speak about something. So one time, a teammate doesn't communicate, and that often leads to all kinds of drama. So holding things in different situations does not create connection. It does not create clarity, and it doesn't, it's inauthentic, right? And if we're not inauthentic, we cannot have other people connect to us. No one can fully see you when you're holding back, when you're hiding, when you're keeping secrets. And so a relationship where there are secrets being kept is a relationship that's already breaking under that weight. So the fear that we have, the safety we're trying to seek is not real in the first place. So that's where we have to kind of lay these things out and really look at them honestly and openly and ask ourselves, what am I protecting by hiding this, really? Right? And is that better than the brokenness, the disconnection that I'm creating by hiding this? And this is similar to the I'm fine fortress we talked about a couple episodes ago. We think we're being strong, right? Well, I'll just bear this with patience. I'll keep quiet about it. I won't talk about it. I won't bother anyone with this. I won't make it a big deal. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're actually being isolated. So we're not being strong, but we are isolating ourselves by doing this. Communication can be an act of worship. We often think that Ibadah, worship, happens in our prayers. Maybe it happens in our du'as, it happens with fasting, it happens with giving charity. But we often don't realize that the way that we speak to other people, the way that you speak to your spouse, also is a form of worship. If you are allowing resentment, barriers, any object to grow in your heart because you're too afraid to have a hard talk, you're obstructing the flow of barakah, of blessing in your own home and in your relationship. So while you may think that you're doing some sort of righteous deed by holding things in, by creating, what it really is doing is creating a barrier between you and another believer in many cases, right? And that's harmful. So communication, especially if you have the right intention, can be a beautiful, important act of worship that can not only get you closer to your Lord, but closer to the people in your life. You can strengthen your relationships, strengthen your family. And again, like everything else, every other good that you do in this world, it has a ripple effect. So if we're talking about the relationship between you and your spouse, imagine the impact when you have open communication flowing between you and your husband. And you speak what's on your mind and you speak what's on your heart, right? In a loving way, in a respectful way, and in an honest and open way. And there's that flow between you of communication, of back and forth, of listening, of hearing one another, and of being on the same page, right? So that they can really understand where you're at, what's on your mind, what state of being are you in. And they see that trust that's built through that process. Your kids witness that. What are they going to learn from that? They're going to see such an incredible, beautiful example. They're going to feel safe being themselves when they see you feeling safe being vulnerable. And that will impact all of their relationships that they have, their relationships with their children. So the amount of impact that you can have by improving your communication is beyond our imagination. Our ummah, our community, is only as strong as our families. And our families are only as strong as our ability to be honest with one another. When we avoid tough talks, what we're really doing is allowing Satan, to live inside the silence. It's just like when we line up for prayer and the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, don't leave gaps, right? You're leaving room for Shaitan. When we leave gaps in our communication, we leave gaps in our relationship like this, we're also leaving room for Satan to thrive, to do his work, right? And we know that his most favorite thing to do is to break up families. His most important work is coming in between a husband and a wife, breaking up relationships, pushing believers apart from one another, creating misunderstandings, allowing assumption to exist, and allowing silence, right? Because in silence, what thrives? How many things happen when have you ever had an instance where there was a situation between you and someone else, and you're sitting over here thinking that they meant this and they are thinking this, and this is what really is, you have this whole idea, this whole story about what really happened and what's going on and what they're thinking and what they're feeling and what they intended. But when you finally have a conversation about that thing, you find out that you were completely wrong, or things were never as serious as you imagined them to be. And all it took was that willingness to sit down and have a conversation about it, right? That is an example of Shaitan living in that silence, right? And thriving and just having a ball, a blast, breaking you apart from the people that you love. So we don't want to allow Satan to live in these gaps, to exist and to work inside the gaps that we're leaving in our lives, inside our families, right? Through lacking the courage to speak. So we don't want to avoid the tough talks. We want to be able to be okay with the discomfort of having a difficult conversation. There's so much good and so much power in that. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the best of the believers are the ones who are best to their families. So what does it mean to be best? Unfortunately, we all often, I've seen this so often, that we think that being best to our families, being a good wife, means being quiet, being silent, holding everything in, stuffing everything down, bearing it, right? And then what happens is that we feel like martyrs. We feel like, look at me. I'm sitting here bearing so much struggle, so much suffering, so much pain, so much grief, so much frustration. And here I am being patient with it. But you're not being patient, sister. You're just stuffing it inside. And many of us know the time when that last straw, this last straw that breaks the camel's back hits and you blow up. What is that? That is not patience, right? That is an example of the fact that you are not truly being patient. You're just stuffing things down when you really should be speaking about them. So which conversations matter? This is where it gets difficult, right? And you guys might be thinking, Danielle, I can't just talk about X because he's going to blow up. He's going to think this. He's going to say this. Or I'm going to lose my cool, right? So there may be so many excuses and so many reasons that you can think of why you should not be having certain conversations that have popped up so far. So if you've been following along with me and you're thinking, yeah, I'm definitely not having a conversation about this with my husband, and I'm not having a conversation with that about that with my daughter, and I'm not having a conversation about this with my mother, right? So as you're having these things come up, you might be saying like, but wait a second, I don't know if I can have all of these conversations. How do I even know which conversations to have? So if you take my suggestion and write these things down, or I like sometimes just to sit and talk out loud with myself, say the things out loud. Like sometimes you need to hear it or you need to see it on paper to get some clarity around these things. So once you do that, how do you know which conversations matter? Which conversations do you actually need to have, and which ones can you allow to be unspoken? Not every single thought that you think needs to be a conversation. So that's something really important to definitely be aware of. It doesn't mean you just run your mouth constantly. You say everything that comes to your mind. Some things are meant to be let go. And there are times when you have to have patience. Yes. But how do you know the difference? So I'm going to give you 2 tests that you can use. All right. So you found out which conversations you're not having. How do you know which ones that you should have? Okay. So the first test is the leak test. So you ask yourself, is this unspoken thing draining my energy every time I see this person? And it could be every time I think about this issue, right? So if there's something that happened that bothered you, something that was said to you, or something you really need to tell somebody, when you think about that situation, when you think about that issue, do you feel your energy being drained? Do you go like, oh, a huge, groan? Do you feel like like almost like butterflies in your stomach? Does it make you feel angry? Does it make you feel resent? What emotions come up, right? So sometimes those difficult emotions, those are a sign of an energy leak. Sometimes it could literally make you feel exhausted, like you just want to run away from that situation. And the thought of having that conversation is really, too uncomfortable to bear. So that's the leak test. Am I leaking energy around this? The second test is the barrier test. Is this silence making me feel lonely, even when we're in the same room? So if that silence is kind of putting up a wall, that you feel like you can't be yourself, you feel like there's a lack of connection, you feel lonely in your relationship, then that's a huge sign that this silence is not healthy and that this is a conversation that should be had. So today I want you to look at your conversations that you're not having, take the leak test, take the barrier test. And if you find that you're losing energy around this issue, if you find that there is a barrier that is between you and your loved one because of this issue, because of the silence, right? Then choose one conversation that will bring vitality back into your life, back into your heart, back into your relationship. And this isn't to win an argument. This is to clear a path. So this is about speaking your truth, about being vulnerable, about being authentic. Because when you're hiding, you're not truly sharing yourself with the people in your life. They can't truly see you when you're hiding part of yourself. And again, we're choosing something that is important to you, something that matters, something that when you speak about it, it will make a difference, or it will bring a lightness to your own heart, right? A lightness, like lift a weight off your shoulders. And I recommend you start with one of the easier ones. So don't start with the most dire situation, but start with something that's a bit lighter, something you're a bit more comfortable with sharing. And you can even preface this. You can be super honest and say, look, there's this thing that has been on my mind and I haven't spoken to you about it. I've been silent about it. And I feel like it's kind of been a barrier between us. And I've been feeling really lonely over here, kind of holding this on my own, or every time I think about it, I literally feel like I want to go lay down. I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. This is draining my energy. But I haven't spoken about it with you because I'm afraid I won't find the right words. I'm afraid of your reaction. I'm afraid you might be hurt. I'm afraid I'll get emotional while I talk about this. I'm struggling with finding the courage to be able to talk about this with you. And if you preface the conversation with something like that, you're really letting the other person in to what's going on inside you. And it will be so much easier for that person to receive the message, whatever that message is, when you start in this way of being really vulnerable. And you're setting yourself up for success in this situation as well, because you're being very honest. You have nothing to hide and nothing to protect now. And so let's say if the other person says, like, how could you say this to me? You can remind them, like, I remember I told you that this was a difficult conversation. Remember I started by saying that this was really hard for me and I might not be able to find the right words to express myself. So you're both you're in a really open ground, right? Really honest, open ground to be able to have a conversation. And if it gets really difficult, you can always put it on pause and say, you know what, this is really difficult. And I think I need to take a step back and maybe we can revisit this. But at least you've shared what was on your mind and on your heart. And so how to do it, we're going to talk about in an upcoming intensive, something called the soft startup. Because I know that you're like, if I share this thing that I've been holding in so long, it's going to be a disaster, right? You might be afraid of an explosion. And you might be even afraid of your own self. Like, how am I going to show up in this conversation when I share about this thing that I've been holding inside for so long? But there's a specific technique called the soft startup. And this is the secret to opening up a hard conversation without triggering the other person's defenses. And I'm going to show you the exact words to say, inshallah, that ensure that you're finally heard. So we're going to save the deep dive training on this for the Uplift Intensive, inshallah. But also if you have questions about how to do that, you can feel free to comment and ask, right? And we'll share them, inshallah. But for now, what I really want you to focus on is the awareness. So you start with that awareness of, like, I'm not having certain conversations. That's an important thing to know about you, because one of the problems is that we often think the other people in our lives are the ones creating the distance, that are the ones that are isolating us. They're the ones that are draining our energy, right? The ball is in their court. We often feel that way. I was just talking to my sister about this earlier, and she shared with me a story about a woman who was on the brink of divorce. So they'd been married for a long time. They had children, and the marriage was falling apart. It was breaking down. And they were so close. It was like, this marriage is not going to last. And she took one last kind of moment where she's like, I need some time by myself. And they had a cabin somewhere, like a vacation house. And she said, I'm just going to go and spend some time there alone and think about this. And she went there, she spent some time by herself. And while she was there, she was praying to God, about what to do, how to handle this situation. And through that process, it was shown to her, and she realized that it was her, that she actually had responsibility in that relationship. It wasn't only her spouse's fault. And she made a decision to change the way that she showed up in her relationship. And when she did, her whole marriage was able to be turned from broken, crumbling, falling apart, and on the brink of divorce to a healthy relationship with communication that is now thriving. That is what's possible. So know that that is what's possible, and know that the place to begin that process is with that awareness that you have so much influence and power inside your relationship. You have the ability to transform your relationships. But you can't do it if you're not aware of what's going on. So that even that first part of the process where you start saying to yourself, I'm not having a conversation about X with so-and-so, do that practice. If you walk away with nothing else from this episode, please take advantage of that exercise. Say it out loud to yourself. Write it down in a journal, or just think about it in your mind. Whatever you do, I assure you're going to come up with many conversations potentially that you've been holding inside. And so it's very eye-opening to realize all the things you are not saying. That by itself is so powerful. And once you do that, then you can start going through that process of deciding, well, which ones of these conversations should I be having? Which ones of these are important? Not just to me, but they're really important for this relationship to be able to thrive. And then you can begin to start to master, like, how do I bring this topic up to my spouse, to my mom? With courage, right? Courage, I want to remind you, is not having no fear. So of course, you're going to have that feeling of discomfort. You may have fear around how this conversation is going to pan out, what the results are going to be. But courage is doing the thing even when you're afraid. That's the definition of courage. So you're going to have to muster up a bit of courage for this. But remember that without having that conversation, the relationship is already breaking down. So what do you really have to lose at the end of the day? If you can bring something out in a relationship, a conversation that will create connection, that will create authenticity, and will also model to the other person safety, because we may be afraid about what's going to happen to us when we are vulnerable. But when we are vulnerable, we are modeling openness and honesty and authenticity, which will create safety in our relationship for our partner as well, whoever they are. And it's amazing because I've seen this unfold even between clients of mine and their parents. So you're talking about lifelong relationships that have been fraught with all kinds of secrets and, unspoken things that create so much tension and so many assumptions and so much pain that exists in these relationships can be relieved like almost instantly. And so simply by having a conversation, because when you do this, it is an act of leadership as well. So you're truly showing up as a leader. And it's not easy, but it will get easier. And when you see the results, the beneficial results, you'll, inshallah, never go back to hiding and keeping secrets and building walls of silence in your relationships. So for me, for example, I told you about the talks that I've had to have with my husband. And the only reason we've been able to navigate the cancer talk, and all that's come with this whole cancer experience without crumbling ourselves, is because we have already cleared these silent walls in our relationship. And we've been practicing small, uncomfortable talks. And by doing that, it helps us be ready for big, life-altering talks. So if you want the scripts, what to say, how to do the soft startup, you want to build the confidence to be able to have these sorts of conversations, to speak the unspoken. And if you want the community that can help you tear down your silent walls, then I want to invite you to be in the room with me on February 7th at JSMC in Tampa. at Uplift. So we have our links for this program. You should find them in the show notes, in the comments potentially. So look for that. jsmctampa.org/uplift is where you can find the link to register for that program, where you can actually go through this work yourself. And meanwhile, join the FKAD community as well. So subscribe to our FKAD Institute channel here. Check out all of the other amazing, uplifting videos. May Allah make them beneficial. And let's make our communication truly an act of ibadah, of worship. Let me know if you found this beneficial. If you want to share some of the conversations that haven't been having, and what you came up with in the comments, if you feel comfortable doing that, please do share with us. I'm sure there are so many women out there that are going to be able to identify with you. You're not alone, most likely. And let us know as well, like, did you have some of those conversations and what happened? How did it go? And what did you do to build the courage in yourself to be able to approach that conversation? And may Allah make it beneficial. May Allah make it easy. May Allah strengthen our relationships with one another. May Allah help us be the leaders and foundations of thriving, authentic, highly connected, merciful, and tranquil relationships, and strong families, and strong, generations after generations. So I pray that Allah helps us be the ones that really trailblaze and set a beautiful example for everyone that we have in our lives, including our children, and so that they can have thriving relationships with greater ease. And I really see this, creating a ripple effect throughout our communities and overall strengthening our community across the world, inshallah. So go have some conversation that sets you free today, inshallah. And I'll see you next week, inshallah. We're going to be talking about how to create a safety, a safe haven in your home, inshallah. Thanks so much for listening. Can't wait to see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.